Hello, all of you. Well, let me just ask as a first thing as we get started. Do you all have agendas? Do you know what the agenda is for tonight? I see nods. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and as necessary, Commissioner, we can put the agenda up on the screen.
That's okay. Thank you for offering. I think we're good, but I just wanted to do that. Thank you, Steve. Very nice. Well done. It passed the early test. Good familiarity. Tony, how are we coming on the quorum?
We're still waiting on one or two panelists to join. We can do a quick roll call to see who is here. I know Chris Campany has yet to join.
Yep.
But we may have everyone else here who said that they were joining this evening.
Okay. Please read through. Let's go.
Okay. So just roll call of panelists. Please say yes or give a thumbs up so we know you're here. Madeline Arms.
Yes, present.
Chris Campany. Not yet. Tricia Capolino. Okay, I did not have any response from her, so I don't know. Corey Daniels.
Present.
Okay. Dave Eastman indicated he was unavailable this evening. Bill Irwin.
I'm here.
Okay. Bob Leach, are you here? Nope. Brett Long indicated he could not make it this evening. Jim Pinkerton. Okay, Jim is giving a thumbs up because he's having some difficulty speaking this evening. David Pearson.
I'm here. Thank you, Tony.
Okay, Marvin Resnikoff.
I'm here, Tony.
Okay, Laura Sibilia. I know you were here.
I am here.
Okay, Lissa Weinman. Lissa, I think you're muted.
Hi. Sorry, I was muted.
There we go.
I am present. Thank you.
Okay, and lastly, Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, present here.
Okay. Okay, by my count, we currently have 9 panelists, which is minimum for quorum. We are expecting Chris Campany to join. He did say he could be a few minutes late, but I think we're good to go.
Thank you, Tony. Then let's get started with that, please. Hello. I guess the only opening remarks I would offer two things. One, thank you for your service. I know this is volunteering of your time, so I truly am grateful for your help on this and your active participation. So thank you. And thank you to Tony for doing a lot of the spade work. I assume Tona Caroline is on here. So I don't see her, but is Caroline on?
She
Yes,
was.
I'm
okay.
here.
There we go.
Okay. There you are. Hey, Caroline. So thank you for that. Just quickly, this is the first time I'm meeting you all. So just quickly, with regards to myself, I've been the position was appointed December 20th. I've been in this role since January 6th. I was blessed with the opportunity to inherit, for the time being, chairing of this particular meeting, this particular group. When I joined, I heard Tony talking about the additional opportunities to serve. If you know of someone you think would be a good addition as you scan, especially for those who participated for a while, if there's a particular skill set that would supplement and nicely complement the skills you all bring that we have as a team right now, I would be grateful for that. Or if you have ideas, please just share them with Tony or myself. We'll be glad to act on that. We have some ideas. We did have one resume, one application that we're following up with, but there was a bit of a time delay. So we'll see if that individual is still interested. So more to come on that. I think you have the agenda. I know Caroline has put together a great presentation. I think for all of our edification, maybe primarily for mine, although I've been briefed by the team, we'll walk through kind of the purpose of this group, some things that are happening, and then follow the agenda as you see there. Generally speaking, just a quick preview, things are going pretty darn well. So that's a nice thing to be able to give you a punchline with regards to that. with that, I'll stop. Are there any other, Opie, you have the agenda, any suggested changes, any other remarks for anyone else that they'd like to offer at this time? All right.
Commissioner, I would just add, it looks like Bob Leach has just joined, so we have 11 panelists.
Well,
I'm
I'm sorry,
my
10.
name's not Rosalie.
Oh, nice. Okay, we know you're Bob, not Rosalie. I just want to say welcome, Commissioner. Welcome, Commissioner Johnson. We look forward to working with you.
thank you, Alyssa. Thank you very much. And I understand we'll hear from you a bit later. Yeah, some stuff we're going to be talking. That's excellent. Okay, with that, have you all seen we have the approval of the December 9 meeting minutes? Just Tony and Caroline, as we discussed, I am recusing myself. Obviously, I wasn't there, so I wanted to register that I am not voting on this, but if you've had a moment to look at and review those minutes, I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes for the December 9 meeting, please.
So move.
Is there a second, please? Thank you, Lissa. Any discussion on these minutes? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
All those opposed to accepting the minutes. I hope there shouldn't be anyone there. But again, all right. If hearing none, all right, the minutes are hereby passed. Thank you very much.
Abstaining, Laura Sibilia.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate that. So both you and I. Okay, so now we're up. Dr. Sarah Hogan and Steve Maharis, a report from the DOE on Yankee spent fuel. Are you all ready?
We're ready.
Well, then why don't you take it away, please? I'm going to be right here. I'm just going to give you all the undivided attention. I'll shut off my video for now, but I am right here. So
All right.
weigh in and how, as you're presenting, would you like questions after? Would you like questions during? What's your pleasure, please, Doctor?
We can do questions as we go.
Okay. All right. Well, then please take it away.
All right. Thank you.
Just bear with me a moment. The presentation has suddenly gone MIA.
Well, while we have this moment, Dr. Hogan. Oh, there we go. Oh, we almost had a moment. If you can work in a little bit about yourself, I would appreciate that.
I'm Sarah Hogan. I am a transportation program manager within the Department of Energy's Office of Nuclear Energy, as we see here. Specifically, I work in the Office of Spent Fuel and High-Level Waste Disposition. And I'm here today with Steve Maharis. I work with him. He's from the Pacific Northwest National Lab, and we work together on a lot of transportation projects for the Department of Energy. He's on the lab side, and I'm his federal manager. So today, we're going to talk about one of our projects, specifically the initial site-specific de-inventory reports, and I'm going to provide some background, and Steve is going to provide an overview of the recently released public report.
Just a couple of things, Doctor. Thank you for that. I'll just say, I didn't mention it was in the chat, but just know, please, that there is an AI assistant taking notes here. I hope that you're all comfortable with that, but just to be clear that is happening.
Thank you.
Secondly, Dr. Hogan, I'm so glad you're here because some of your compadres, a lot of your colleagues are no longer your colleagues, so it's good to see you.
Yes, glad to be here.
And glad you're here. Yay. And Steve, I would just say I've done a lot of stuff over the last 6 years with PNNL on a host of different projects. I'm aware of the relationship PNNL has with UVM. So you're a trusted partner and very valuable. So Sarah, glad you're here. Steve, you're glad you're here. So go for it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. We're happy to be here. So next slide, we'll get started. This is just our standard disclaimer that says this is a technical presentation and nothing I say supersedes the standard contract that Department of Energy has in place. Next slide. All right, so our office is planning for the future transportation of spent nuclear fuel off commercial power plants such as Vermont Yankee. And to begin planning, we have engaged in gathering data from nuclear power plants around the country. So one of the projects that we are funding that helps us gather this data is our nuclear power plant infrastructure evaluations for spent nuclear fuel. So I'm the federal manager for this project, and Stephen Harris is our lab lead. And these evaluations, really, we go to a site, we look at the power plant, we try to see what options are available for moving fuel off-site by investigating the on-site and near-site infrastructure. Is there barge access? Is there direct rail? Is there a heavy haul necessary to get to rail? We also engage with communities while we're there. We talk to site personnel. We engage with local tribes and states representatives. We usually bring along with our DOE team members of the Department of Transportation, the FRA, and other stakeholders to get a sense of what the community feels about the power plant and engage with them as well while we're there. So as this work matured, DOE is looking at next steps and understanding what are the next steps to move fuel off, what are the challenges, what are the obstacles that the department needs to overcome in order to remove spent nuclear fuel and greater than Class C waste off sites. Next slide. So one of the steps that we're taking is to fund initial site-specific de-inventory reports. So these reports are a first look at how a contractor perceives that we should move forward with removing fuel from a site. Again, these are contractor perspectives, not representative of DOE's plans necessarily in the future that we will take. So this contractor uses a lot of the information that is provided from the DOE infrastructure evaluations. They use multi-attribute utility analyses. We'll get into what that is. So a structured system for evaluating different options. And one other note is that these are initial site-specific de-inventory reports. So there will be some time before we move fuel off-site. And as we get more information, as things change, we can update these reports as we go. Yes, question.
Yes, please. Just quickly, is it one contractor doing the same contractor is looking at every single site?
Correct. So we, next slide, but we have a subcontract with Arano, who is doing our reports currently. So they've done all of their reports. Previously, Ariba, Arano now.
Thank you.
Yeah. So again, these are deeper dives into the activities needed to remove spent nuclear fuel from specific sites. They're led by a team at Arano. And they build off, again, that information that we gather from nuclear power plant evaluations. All of the reports that have been created follow the same structure. So they each have the same table of contents. It allows for consistency and comparability. So you can compare sites kind of apples to apples and compare challenges and different other factors that come into play that Steve's going to talk about. So we have available for you to browse 13 reports that have been released. They're all available at curie.pnnl.gov. So once you get these slides, you can use that link to get access. Anyone from the public can go to that website. You don't need access. And they're available for all those sites listed, Vermont, Yankee, and San Onofre being the most recent at the start of the year. Next slide. So a little bit more about the multi-attribute utility analysis, or MUA. So it is likely at different sites, there are going to be a few different options for how to move fuel off-site in terms of different modes of transportation. So this MUA provides a structured way to compare these modes by identifying attributes along routes and their associated metrics and comparing the positive and negative aspects of these routes. So for example, some routes might be shorter in length, others might require fewer crane lifts, and some might be higher in costs. So how can you compare that? Through the MUA, they do a pairwise comparison of the metrics to provide relative rankings, and then they also do a pairwise comparison of the routes to provide relative rankings of the routes to come to a conclusion what this contractor deems as their preferred route. Next slide. So what attributes do they include in this MUA? There are over 30 metrics that are evaluated. They're associated with cost, environmental impact, institutional considerations, permitting, among others. Some of the specific metrics are listed here. Again, there's over 30, but this is a subset, including transportation costs, number of permits, population, transit duration, among others that you can see listed, and more details on the MUA in those reports that are elaborated on. Next slide. So now I'm going to hand it over to Steve, now that we have some background on what these reports include and where they get some data, and talk about specifically the Vermont Yankee de-inventory report. So, Steve?
So great. Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to talk about the actual guts of the report, the details. So the reports are based on removing the entire inventory from a site in one shipping campaign. They're not based on the oldest fuel first protocol that you might have heard about. They're based on, you come to a site and you remove everything that's there and never darken their door again. Next, please. So to do an analysis of the logistics, the first thing that I have to know is the concept of operations. So in this report, we develop concept of operations for two cases. One is direct rail and one is heavy haul truck derail. So this slide illustrates the direct rail concept of operations. So you move casks from the independent spent fuel storage installation to the on-site rail line. You build a train, you put the buffer cars on the train, you put the rail escort vehicle on the train, and then you're off to go to the destination. So it takes us about 16 days to prepare that rail. Consists of 5 loaded casks from the site. Next slide, please. Here's the concept of operations for heavy haul truck derail. Now, in this case, what we do is we establish a transload location, and we evaluated 2 locations in this report. So we put the waste, the cask, on a heavy haul truck transporter. We move it from the site to the transload location and then assemble the train. And then it's the same process. We hook up buffer cars, we hook up the rail escort vehicle. That's the car that holds the guards and the guns and has skills and features. And then we're off to the destination site. Now, obviously, the Department of Energy does not have a destination site yet for spent fuel. So for that reason, we analyze transport to the geographic center of the United States in these reports. And that's been the consistent practice since, season 1, episode 1 of the de-inventory reports.
Steve, can I ask a question? This is Marvin calling.
Yeah.
Why is this train going up? Why is the truck going up to Bellows Falls? Why is that a transfer point?
So what we wanted to do is we didn't want to prejudge the issue of whether the rail line on site would be available. So we wanted to cast a slightly broader net to look at potential routes. So that's the reason that we look at 3 direct rail routes, and then we add in the heavy haul truck routes in order not to prejudge the issue, Marvin.
Thanks.
I think I can you hear me? I don't know if, I don't know how to raise my hand here.
Uh-huh.
I can give you a little information on that. I remember the last time we had such a similar radioactive item coming through the state,
Mm-hmm.
and it was coming from Connecticut Yankee. It was the head from the radioactive or from the Connecticut Yankee plant, and
Mm-hmm.
they could not get it across New England without going north to Vermont and cross over Vermont and then cross the bridge in Troy with that weight. It probably still the same, and that's why you've got it going to Bellows Falls before it takes its left to go west.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think that train, once it gets on the train, it's going to go from Bellows Falls downstate.
I thought we were talking about the truck, the heavy haul truck.
Yeah,
It's just a short, heavy haul truck from the site up to Bellows Falls.
Oh, I
Yeah,
misunderstood. Sorry.
It's on the order of 30 or so miles between the site and the transload locations.
yes.
Yep. So next slide, please. So big picture wise, we looked at 27 routes. We necked down to 5 routes that we analyzed in the MUA. We looked at 3 rail routes, one that would be a route that the railroads would potentially choose, another route that is the minimum time route, and another route that is the minimum distance route. And then we also analyzed 2 heavy haul truck options that both go to Bellows Falls. We did a detailed analysis of sensitivities.
Steve, sorry, Steve.
Yes.
I just want to be clear. So I assume that the order in which those 5 routes were presented is that this seems to be initially the most appealing or the best quote unquote route. Is that why it's in the order they are in?
Well, you might be seeing a slide in a couple of slides that tells you that.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So it has to be noted too that the heavy haul truck routes would require state permitting. The rail routes would need to comply with the provisions of 49 CFR 172.820. That is colloquially known as the rail routing rule. And obviously, any routes that would be used would have to be what we call route cleared. That means that the infrastructure can handle the dimensions and the weights, because the first thing about transport is if it doesn't fit, it doesn't ship, right? So next slide, please. So this gives you a view of Route C, rail to Palmer, Palmer to points west to the geographic center of the United States. The next one, could you go to the next? Yeah, is the minimum travel time route. There's slight differences in the distances that don't really show up on your map here. So that Route C is just a few more miles longer than is the Route A or B. So if you go to the next slide, please, Tony, that illustrates the minimum distance route. And if you go to the next slide, Tony, you'll see the heavy haul truck to rail route. And if you go to the last slide, you'll see the second heavy haul truck to rail route. So basically, though, the routes use approximately once you get down to Palmer, they approximately use the same
Yeah.
route going west. Next slide, please.
Just off curiosity,
Yeah.
what's the difference? What's the actual time just to get to that location?
Oh, you know what? I
For
can
each
give you
route.
the mileage is really what I look at. So Route C is 1,164 miles. Route A, 1147. Route B, 1145. Route D, 1195, and Route E is 1193. Of course, you got to add on that little bit of heavy haul truck length to those rail distances that I just gave you.
Well, do you have yet how many days that actually turns into for each one?
Yeah, just a second. As we talk, I'll look that up for you, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so this is the rankings of the route, and you can see why I put the routes in the order that I put the routes in, right? So Route C was the top ranking route. Route B was the next ranking route. A, then D, then E. Hence the order in which I put them on the previous slide that was just asked about, right? Next slide. Yep.
Let me just ask if I may, please. So 24.65% looks like.
Yeah.
There's 12 other assessments that were made. Is that right?
No, we only put, oh yeah, right. 12 other de-inventory reports that were
Yes.
done. Correct.
Excuse me.
Yes.
All right. Sorry. I didn't, that's okay. I didn't use the right term of art. This looks high, but I mean, were there other de-inventory reports where the top option came in higher?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I would say that undoubtedly there were, because those top three rail routes, right? Those are really approximately the same route.
Yeah.
What you see in other analyses is a case where there's sometimes a very clear favorite, right? Where we don't have three routes that are about the same. So there's less dilution across the three, and you get concentrated into the one instead.
So one really, really good option.
Yeah, one really favorable option. Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Right. Thank you.
Steve,
Yeah.
can I ask how many casks are going in each shipment? 3 or 5?
5.
Because the text said 3, that's why I asked.
Oh, it shouldn't say 3, it should say 5. That's what the analyses were based on. So we have a shipment of 5, and then the last shipment is of 4, right? Any other questions? Oh, transit duration times. So Route C was routes A, B, and C are in the ranges of 33 to 35 hours transit time. Routes D and E a little bit longer, 37 hours.
Does this all go with the same company, the same utility?
Oh, no, not at all. Because so the Palmer route starts off on one railroad, transfers to another. That's the way railroading works in the United States. So the Palmer, you'd have to take it from the site using the NECR, and then you'd have to go from the NECR to the CSX, I believe. So that's the way the railroading works in the United States. A single carrier will not typically move from a reactor site all the way across the country. It would be more normal that you would take it from the site using a short line, and then you would interchange with one of the big 7 class 1 railroads at an interchange point that is convenient based on the rail network.
So at that point, they changed the crew, the train crew.
There'll be periodic changes of crews all across the route because train crews are only authorized to work on specific routes, right? They don't have a nationwide warrant through which they can work. Now, the other thing, though, is that we assumed that this was a dedicated train shipment. And the reason for that assumption gets back to what Sarah said about using the Atlas rail car, right? So if we use Atlas, we are building a train consist that complies with AAR standard S2043. That's the standard for rail cars that carry spent fuel. Now, in order for it to be an S2043 consist, all the cars in the train need to meet that standard except for the locomotives. So buffer cars, all the cast cars, and the rail escort vehicle. So that really, for practical purposes, means that the train would have to be dedicated, and that's the assumption that we made in this report. Does that help?
Is there a buffer car in between each cast car?
In this particular analysis of routes, not. But there could be routes in other areas of the country based on bridge loadings and bridge lengths where to get a route clearance, we may have to add buffer cars between cast cars. It's just that we did not have to do that in this particular case.
Thanks.
Any other questions about the rankings of the routes?
I just had a question regarding the weight of each cask.
Yeah, correct. So that those high stars weigh about 300,000 pounds each. So
300,000 pounds each.
yeah, approximately, yeah.
So we're talking about
150 tons.
5 cars, 5 of
Yes.
them at a time, and they're going fast enough to get there in 33 hours to
Yeah, sure.
geographic
Because
center?
they're a dedicated rail shipment. We're not hanging around in rail yards, right? We're driving straight through, and we're only going to the geographic center of the United States, right? So, you know, if I were to drive that route, I could make that in a day in my car, right? A long day, but nevertheless a day, right? Railroading takes a little bit longer, and so that's why you see the 35 hours or so as opposed to, 13, 14 hours in a car, right?
Do you have other reactor sites that are also unloading at the same time?
For the purposes of this analysis, no, we look at one site per. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are a lot of assumptions that go into the report.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. So de-inventory cost and schedule, 81 weeks, 5 casts per shipment, 15 days to load a train. or 12 days if we can use two crews. Estimated total cost of 18.5 million. Now, that does not include the cost of the transportation casks. It also does not include the cost of the rolling stock. That's the train cars, right? The Atlas cars, the buffers, the REV. And the reason that we do it like that is because we view those as system resources. They would be available to all reactors to use. And so it would be unfair to allocate them to a particular site in the analysis. So we assume that that is a shared resource amongst all sites. Next, please.
Can I ask you a question here?
Yeah.
These casks at Vermont Yankee that they've loaded the fuel in,
Yeah.
does the fuel have to be taken out of those casks and placed in a transportation cask?
Yes,
Or can
but
they be
so I would remove the canister and I would place the canister in the transportation cask. But I don't need to remove the fuel from the canisters.
Yeah.
I merely remove the canister and load it into the transportation cask.
You by chance have dose rates on the side of those canisters right now?
Oh, I don't personally, but Corey, I would imagine, does.
Corey? I thought he was on here.
Yeah, they're about 180 tons, Bob.
I was talking about the dose.
Oh, the
What's
dose
rate on the
rates.
side of one of those canisters?
That all varies depending on the heat load and the age, how long it's been loaded. I mean, by the time we get around to doing this, the anticipated operation will include a stack up of some variety to get them into the transportation cask that is also part of a system operation that can be conducted pretty repeatedly and very, very reliably. It's not going to be that exciting of an operation.
I'm still asking the same question. The dose rate on the size of those casks. What's that going to be? To transfer them from those casks into the transportation cask. Last I knew, those containers had over 1,000 rem on the side of them.
Some of them do, Bob. Some of them are 400 MR. Some of them are 1,500. I'm sorry, 400 R. Some of them are 1,500 R on the side of them.
That's what I thought.
Again, that'll be a shielded operation of some kind to stack those into the transportation container. But as Steve mentioned, remember the name of the ISTOR 100 system we have, those canisters are called MPCs, multi-purpose canister for storage, and licensable with a certificate of compliance for transportation with the correct storage overpack as well. But yeah, good question. They're pretty hot.
Yeah.
Yes. So Corey just mentioned a stack up. So the way that this would work in theory would be that I would have a concrete cask containing canister. I would move a transfer cask over on top of that using some kind of stack up arrangement. I would pull the canister into the transfer cask, which is also shielded, right? Then I would move the concrete cask out. I would move the transportation cask in. I would then lower the canister inside of the transportation cask. I would then do things like put the lid on and things like that. And then I would move that transportation cask onto the Atlas. Now, I would also have to do things like install impact limiters, put it on its transportation skid. That's the thing that holds the cask and interfaces with the Atlas rail car. But that's the essence of the operation.
But
Okay,
you would be loading up this transportation cask at the reactor site itself.
Correct.
Who's doing the work? Is it NorthStar that's loading these things up, or is it Orano or some other company?
Well, that's to be determined. Typically, what is done for loadings at other site, and I don't know the particulars about the Vermont Yankee site, is that the vendor of the transportation cask would bring in their loading crew to do the transfer and the loading of the transportation cask. But that's to be worked out, and maybe, NorthStar could decide to do it a slightly different way. Does that
I
make
ask
sense,
you-
Corey?
can I ask Corey another simple
A lot of
question?
A lot of these
Uh,
are undefined, Bob, but ultimately I think Steve's close to the target that would make the most sense. There would likely be dedicated teams from
yeah,
each
that part I know.
vendors.
I just got another simple question. Do we still have the crane on site that was used to move those containers around?
No, the vertical cash transporter has been dismantled and it's actually been it's been sold. It actually went to South Texas Project to support their activities.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. Sorry for taking the time for that one.
Can I ask, is it, this is coming out of the decommissioning fund to the 18.5 just to load them up on site? And then once they leave the site, the liability for that load immediately transfers to the DOE, i.e. all of us, basically, the US taxpayer, right?
So in our analysis, we assume that the Department of Energy is the shipper, right? And so that transfer would occur. What we usually say is, at the fence, right? But there's some particulars to be worked out there of the transfer. And then, so the liability would also transfer from the utility, NorthStar, to the Department of Energy at that particular point.
And Steve, let me just help. Let's appreciate that the cost for the transportation and the operation to manage the
Right.
does not come out of the decommissioning fund. That is not part of the decommissioning costs. That is actually a component of what the spent fuel management costs are that get recovered from the DOE because the fuel is stranded at each of these sites.
So if it was NorthStar that was doing the loading up, or the company, whatever dedicated team from the transportation cask company, they would be having to sue DOE for the 18.5 million that they're estimating it would take to load those casks up and get them to the fence.
The 18.5 includes the transport, though. So NorthStar would never be charging the DOE for the transport part, right?
Right, okay, so that's what I'm trying to drill down to. The 18.5 is after it leaves the fence. That's what you're estimating to the geologic center or wherever the heck it's gonna ever go.
That's most, but not all of the cost.
Okay.
Just a technicality, Steve. I'm not sure about the future. The last I knew, the regulations state that when the radioactive material is shipped, it's the responsibility of the site that has the license to put it on the road. It's their responsibility until it reaches the next licensee.
But in this case, the Department of Energy takes custody of the fuel at the fence. So this is a little bit different situation.
Right.
Yeah. I just wanted you to make sure that you knew it's in the regulations that way now. And
okay, thank you.
All right then. How are we doing, Steve? Are you done?
I think I have another slide.
Oh,
One
good.
more.
All right.
Yeah, one more slide. What's not to like? Tony,
Yes,
could you
yes,
put up the
yes.
last?
Since we were going into a long discussion, I stopped the share. Bear with me for just a second.
See, historic
so I get
Illinois.
this back up.
That's the that's the undisclosed central U.S. place for the.
The geographic center of the United States, right?
Can I ask the DOE people, when is decommissioning finished at any given site as far as you're concerned? As far as DOE is concerned?
Hey, Steve, I'm gonna help you out here. That's not a DOE
Yeah.
fund.
Yeah.
You're exactly right, Corey. That's an NRC question, not a DOE
Right.
question, right?
NRC function, and ultimately we maintain, at least currently, the way most licensees who were operating nuclear reactors, they maintain their Part 50 license.
Mhm.
They store their fuel and manage it all in accordance with Part 72, which is inherently part of the Part 50 responsibility. And then once the site finishes all operations, including transporting the fuel all the way and then decommissioning the ISPC, not until that point can the final status survey and the final site release be conducted before the site cancel their license. But it has nothing to do with DOE.
Okay.
Right. So,
I just wanted to reiterate that.
Go
so
ahead,
the last slide here. Tony, could you go back to the previous slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so our work is never done. So there's always next steps. We have to examine an on-site path from the independent spent fuel storage installation to where the loading is actually going to be done. If improvements need to be made to the path, they're going to have to be made. Evaluate the canisters against the requirements of the transportation certificate of compliance, finalize the choice of casks, establish the location of a transfer pad. That's where the stack up that Corey mentioned would take place. We need to, of course, get dates. We need to establish any equipment needs, look at electrical power requirements, refine cost estimates. We're always doing that, and prepare the site for rail loading. And that is my last slide. So I'll turn the floor back over to Tony if there's no more questions.
I have a question. I noticed when I was looking at the presentation, it looked like not all of the casks were able to be transported in the same way. There was some discrepancies, some different kinds of casks among the ISFC casks. Is that right? Or am I confusing it with something else? Are they all the same in terms of how they're treated, or are there different types of, the internal canisters inside the hull text?
Oh, so there's two different types of canisters, the MPC 68 and 68Ms, but the difference between those two is not very large, right?
Okay.
And so I would not view those as significant differences. It's not like we're shipping PWR and BWR fuel from the same site, where a BWR canister might hold 68 assemblies, a PWR canister might hold 32 assemblies.
Interesting.
But I think what Lisa is saying is there are different type of canisters for different sites. Not all.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
iStar 100 or.
Yep, absolutely. That's absolutely true, Marvin. So at some sites we have PWR fuel that would be shipped in the High Star 190 or the MP 197 HB or the TN Eagle, or, there are probably 3 or 4 mainline transportation casks that will be used in the future to carry the bulk of the inventory. That's a little bit up to the vendors, so I'm speculating on that point now a little bit. But yeah, there's all different kinds of storage systems that are used at the reactor sites now.
And I'll just add that the Atlas rail car was designed to carry all 17 casks that could possibly be used. So
yeah, that's why the
So go ahead, Steve.
Well, that's why the Atlas looks like it looks. It has a pin block arrangement that makes it very flexible in terms of being able to mate up with the cask cradle or skid that I talked about earlier. So we can that enables it to carry these 17 different casks in a very flexible manner.
Okay, I am mindful, according to the agenda, I'm not sure, Tony, but if there's members of the public that would like to ask questions at this juncture, now would be the time in our agenda. Are there any members of the public who'd like to be recognized and ask a question, please?
We do have a question coming in from the chat, it does appear. This is from Noah Wilson. Not sure if this is the right time to ask this question, but will access to the river section by Vermont Yankee be impeded at all during this process?
Good question, Noah. Steve, Sarah, what do you think?
I don't know the answer to that question.
based on the route that was selected, it did not look like there was any barge option. So
yeah, there was no barge option.
So that wouldn't directly impact anything, but
so Corey, did you ever have to restrict access during decommissioning activities at the site?
No, this would be highly unlikely. I don't think.
Okay.
There's a reason why the river access would be impacted whatsoever by either the loading or transportation operations.
Yeah, that was my feeling too, because the stack up would be performed and you would be pulling into a shielded transfer cask. So I just didn't see very much potential for having to do anything on the river.
Intuitively, right? You're moving away from the river, I would assume. Right?
Yeah, well, yeah, the train is moving away from the river. Yes, right.
that would be good.
Yeah.
So Noah, Alyssa, hold on one second. So Noah, I hope that answers. But there you go. And I think, Alyssa, if we may, just sticking with the public, if I have it, is it Skylar Gould?
Yeah, yes, it is. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thanks very much. Very interesting. You mentioned that the canisters obviously are loaded into the transportation casks. At this point, not all the canisters have been approved for transportation.
Correct.
What will happen if and when, if not necessarily at VY, what will happen if a canister is not approved for transportation?
Well, these canisters were designed to be transported, right? They just have not gone through the paperwork with the NRC to add them to the acceptable content for a cask. So we anticipate, and this is a general number for what NRC is telling people now, it could take between 1 and 3 years to add a canister to content, right? But
what does that mean? Add a canister to content?
Okay, so in a transportation certificate of compliance for a cask, they describe in great and gory detail the contents that are allowed to be shipped in the cask, right?
Yeah.
So your content needs to be specifically spelled out, i.e. added to the certificate of compliance for the specific cask. And so that process typically would run 1 to 3 years at the NRC. And that, process would go like this. The vendor would have to prepare a safety analysis report. They would submit that to the NRC. The NRC may have questions, and they would send to the vendor requests for additional information. That's an RAI for short. The vendor would then have to respond to those questions and prepare a final safety analysis report for the NRC. At that point in time, the certificate of compliance would be modified by the NRC to include the content that was analyzed in the safety analysis report. But this is a process that goes on pretty much day in and day out at the NRC, whether it be for storage casks or transportation casks.
Am I wrong though? This doesn't seem like a done deal. I mean that. I mean, my reading, and I obviously I could be wrong, and you guys know what you're doing, but my understanding is that some of these casks, long-term storage casks, are the fuel, the stored fuel the baskets and whatnot that hold it in place may be compromised. That there could certainly be issues. Even with one canister, I'm just what will happen if there is a canister, even in the process of moving these things around, that the canister is not appropriate for transport.
So, Corey, do you all have an aging management plan yet? I think the answer is
yes.
Yeah.
Every licensee who has fuel and dry storage is performing aging management inspections. They have a program. They're meeting all the requirements to ensure that the material condition of this equipment is maintained such that it will ultimately be licensable for a CFC under Part 71. This isn't a surprise this is going to be a slow pitch, Skylar. Everyone is aware. No one would have spent the dollars, time, and energy to load a canister that can ultimately be transported. And it is anticipated that all that paperwork will get arranged in advance of the required transportation campaigns that usually get scheduled.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. That's the first time I've heard it kind of laid out, this process of certifying the canisters for transport. One other question, what kinds of difficulties, infrastructure aside, does DOE anticipate in getting a route cleared?
Oh, so let's see. Route clearance. Oh, okay. Do you want to answer this one, Sarah?
Well, I'm not sure if this is alternative to infrastructure, but I was just thinking we work with some very large packages. So that is kind of one of the greatest barriers to transportation is just being able to clear. Like Steve said, if it doesn't fit, we can't ship it. So that is sometimes why you find routes that are not as direct as you might imagine or think about it going. So Steve, anything to add?
Yeah. I understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, so, you understand that. Add, yeah.
So, the railroad will evaluate your load and compare it to the constraints that are inherent in their infrastructure, right? And so they look at things like the weight of the rail, and they make sure that the
dimensions,
rail, everything like that, dimensions, the thing, dimensions, weights, axle loadings, etc., right? To get a route that, that the load can safely be shipped on. The things that tend to cause the most trouble are related to height as opposed to width. But, we've been able to clear routes all over the United States.
Yeah, that actually wasn't, that sounds like infrastructure. I was asking beyond infrastructure, legal issues, transport. Is that all cleared? Because there certainly will be many lawsuits filed, welcome or not, to moving this material through states, towns, counties. Is that part of your process?
Steve, Sarah, is anticipation of litigation part of the assessment?
Well, we've actually heard that from DOE.
No, Skylar, believe me, I don't mean to diminish the likelihood of litigation. It was more posing the question to Steve and Sarah. Chris, I see you, but can we give an answer to Skylar to the question, please?
Sure. I'm sure there will be hurdles like that posed at us in the future, and we'll have to work with them as they come up.
More specifically, let me ask about the truck that's carrying this cask, this heavy haul truck. That is going 5 miles an hour?
Typically, they might go walking speed, Marvin.
Exactly.
Right.
So that whole issue of carrying it from the reactor site up to Bellows Falls is something that will take quite some time, and one will need road clearance. One would have to do a safety analysis on that part of the trip.
Well, yeah. And the other thing to point out, though, is that was like choice number 4 and 5. Choice number 1 was to go by rail directly from the site, right?
Okay, I just want to, mindful, thank you. Skylar, I want to be clear as a member of the public, did you get your questions answered, please?
Well, generally, I'm obviously DOE will deal with these questions of litigation when they arrive. I was just wondering if this was something that you're working on separately.
So,
have you gotten anywhere with it?
Definitely, the department is aware of ongoing litigations and looking at where there may be issues arising as we're planning for transportation. Absolutely.
And we also have a process in place to work with the states and tribes to,
we do a lot of state and tribal engagement. So we are very involved in states and tribes. We work with committees in every region of the country, tribes that are likely to be on long routes and are involved in our transportation planning. So that is something that we're very proactive about, engaging with the states and making sure they're receiving the information that they feel comfortable and need to receive. And likewise, the information that we need to receive from them and what we need to know are their concerns.
Great. Thank you. Skylar, thank you. Chris, you're up. You've been waiting patiently. Thank you. Go ahead.
So maybe my understanding is incorrect, but hasn't this material been moved around the country already? I mean, is it this? My sense is that we're talking about something new for Vermont Yankee, but in a national context, this isn't particularly new, right?
Or fuel has been shipped across the country. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. The Navy ships fuel regularly. We're currently planning for the transport of a TN32B cask from the North Anna site to the Idaho National Lab for research purposes. That'll be a rail shipment also.
Right.
Okay.
And is this a few years experience or decades experience? My sense is it's decades.
Decades.
Good point, Chris. I'm just mindful. Keep us moving. Unless, Chris, you had anything else? Thank you for the question. Good question. Thank you. All right, Corey, are you up ready for the NorthStar update?
I'm ready when Tony is. Thank you.
Just one more, just a clarifying question regarding that 18.5 million. That's the total job for all of the casks, right? Or is that per shipment?
No, that's the total, but it does not include, remember, the cost of the casks.
Right. So you don't have any actual estimate on, so we can get a sense of how much it will cost overall, in terms of the taxpayer
Well,
support.
we view the cask cost as a system resource, and we don't allocate them to a particular site.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Corey, please. When Tony's ready, Corey.
You should be back with your presentation now, Corey.
Let me just say, Steve and Sarah, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
I
Nathan.
enjoyed it.
Okay, Corey, you have a high bar to meet. We'll see what you got. Let's go.
Do my best. All right, next slide, please. As always, NorthStar would like to reinforce that safety is our highest priority. And with every task, we ensure that we manage radiological, environmental, industrial, and nuclear safety with the utmost care. And I'll be proud to explain our record reflects good performance on that on the next slide. Our project schedule, which this macro has been put up since the beginning when we first took ownership of the site, and we remain on track. You can see the spent fuel management will continue on until we can finally revisit this conversation that we just had with Steve and Sarah, and the rest of the activities are ongoing, and we're getting into demolition of the reactor building shortly. Next slide, please. Overall, our safety performance, I only write good here because we try to remain humble and optimistic, and by all measures from our peers and even our own performance, this performance is remarkable. We're about to turn 2 million person hours worked on site without a lost time accident, which is pretty incredible for a project of this magnitude and time duration. Regulatory performance, also, we've made it since the inception of NorthStar ownership with no cited violations from the NRC. Doesn't mean everything's gone perfect, but in regulatory space, it's a very good record. And again, we talked about the production and the schedule. We're still on track and complete well ahead of the 2030 commitment date for the MOU. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to kind of start at the top of the reactor building and work my way down. As I had mentioned in previous meetings, we're at the point where the radionuclide profile that remains is pretty much nil or de minimis. The total amount of curies that we've been able to package up to leave the site since we last spoke is really tiny. I think it's less than 0.2 of a curie, which is pretty incredible when you figure we shipped over 35,000 curies off the site. So the refuel floor, this is a photo where we had, and what you're looking at there in the foreground is the spent fuel pool. And you can see it's tarped up with the railings over it. This is because we were doing some media blasting operations to clean and penetrate into the sides of the stainless steel wall to get any residue of contamination off of it. And further in the background, you can kind of see it. It's a round circle. That's the reactor cavity itself. And even beyond that, the dryer separator pit would be taped off similarly, and those operations occurred already. But that's the beginning of cleaning up the refuel floor. And even in this photo, quite a bit less clutter than in photos I had showed on previous presentations. Next slide, please. All right, so as that work progressed, we started dismantling some of the major components. At this point, the refuel bridge came down, they chopped it all up, and it was packaged up and disposed of. And those are some photos of the efforts to perform the demolition. Next slide, please.
Wow.
And then and see the refill floor pretty empty here, but it's even more empty than that now. You can see that's just a water tank in the back, and then a lot of small equipment as it's being used. The last few pieces, they get packaged up. We use a reactor milling crane to lower all that down, and then it gets bagged up and prepped for shipment. You can see the refill floor is pretty empty. Next slide. Wow. And then here's two photos. One, you can see personnel on a lift on the left side. They're actually surveying and ensuring that every square inch of the roof, the girders, the structural steel, the walls, everything is clean and in a condition that will support open air demolition. It's a photo from that location down into the spent fuel pool in the foreground again, 40 feet deep, 26 feet wide, 40 feet long, completely clean. Same thing with reactor cavity in the center, connected to the dryer separator pit beyond that, all completely deconned. You can see painted squares where the grid lines are so we can map it out, make sure we didn't miss any spots. But that's all clean and ready for demo. Next slide, please. A little bit up close picture. You can see we put a plywood platform down on the bottom of the reactor cavity floor area, and then pressure washed and deconned and surveyed out the reactor cavity. So you can tell that is nice, clean, bare metal when we're all done with it. Next slide, please. There's a picture from the bottom of the drywall looking up at that same location. And at the very top on the left-hand side, you're actually looking all the way up from about the 252-foot level, the ground, the elevation, all the way up to the top of the reactor building, refuel floor, roof inside. So wide open, completely empty, and completely deconned. Next slide, please. And working our way down the next floor, all equipment's gone, completely deconned, ready for demo. You can see on the photo, I'm sorry, Tony, on the left-hand side, you see a few pieces of equipment that's actually temporary electrical bus work for running the various pieces of equipment that we have powered up from portable diesel generators outside. That equipment will come out last as we shut the lights off and bring the machines in to do the demolition. Next slide, please. Same thing with the next floor down, completely empty. If you knew this floor, quite a bit of equipment was in here, very cluttered, all gone. Everything's been removed, ready to tear the building down. Next slide. The next floor down, these ventilation components were some of the very last things that come out of the 280-foot level. That's the first floor up. That's where we still had some of the equipment where we maintained a negative pressure on the entire structure while we were doing a lot of this work. Not because it was required, but just as an extra preventative measure to ensure that we maintain a level of conservatism, that we couldn't get anything leaving the building that would create a problem anywhere else on the site. But that's all gone now, and this part of the building is ready for demolition also. Next slide, please. And the ground floor. And you're actually looking at where the control rod drive, basically the equipment they used to scram the reactor, that's all gone. All the equipment in the ceiling, all against the walls, all the piping, everything's out. Next slide. And the tourist basement, right? 1.4 million gallon tank. They used to hold the suppression water in the event that had an issue with the reactor. That's all been removed. All these walls, the floor, the ceiling, everything's been deconned. This is ready for demolition also, even though that this will stay since it's way below grade. But this part of the structure is ready for us to move forward and knock the building down. Next slide. So just a few photos to remind folks that we continue to install new wells for sample points. We prep the cores of the concrete in the various locations to ensure it will meet what we will determine as the final derived guide concentration limits. So any of the minute traces of tritium, we know exactly what we're getting into as we tear the building down. And we scan even the excavations for the areas that we've already remediated just to prove that everything's clean And we continue to get excellent results. And I attributed this to 43 years of very good conservative operation of this power plant and continue to find no surprises, which not only helps with the cleanup and the preps to finish this and get to a partial site release, but also manage the costs with not finding anything exotic or challenging for us to complete. Next slide, please. And again, we continue to do environmental monitoring, both upriver and downriver. We take water samples. We check all kinds of different reference point areas just to make sure we have no impact on the environment from a radiological standpoint, and continue to get good reports in all areas. Next slide, please. So the non-red stuff, the I rule, which we're required to meet the site investigation completion criteria, it's all met at this point. All the initially identified areas of concern, activities for investigating those are complete. As I mentioned before, we found no new areas of impact identified, no surprises, always a good thing. We continue sampling, and we're continuing to work with the Agency of Natural Resources to develop a post-decommissioning groundwater monitoring program. And obviously they'll want us to continue to monitor things as we take the building down. And we'll continue to collaborate with them through all our regular meetings that we have at least monthly now. We were doing them twice a week, but we've kind of extended that to monthly for the time being, just because there's nothing new or interesting for us to talk about or resolve. But we'll make those adjustments with the input from the agency representative as needed. And if we need to ramp those up to more frequently, we will do so on their request or our recommendation. Next slide, please. Just a shot of a stage of material in the big top 10 for shipping. Not that important from a decommissioning standpoint, but just a reminder, this is what doing business with this team looks like. It's neat, it's controlled, the housekeeping's in good shape. It's the reason we haven't had any problems, we haven't had any fires, we haven't hurt anybody. And this is the way we continue to do business. And we set a high standard and maintain it. And our folks have gotten used to doing business this way. And this building gets filled up and emptied regularly. Next slide, please. So we're approaching 1,000 shipments. It's been kind of light so far this year, as I mentioned. The majority of the resource and effort have been on deconning and prepping the reactor building for demolition. But we are ready to start that probably the next 3 to 4 weeks. And what will likely occur as a result is we will commence a very intensive shipping campaign where we could be shipping 10 or even 20 rail cars a week, maybe even more than that, depending on how fast we can get them turned around. But we're working with our partners at WCS to set up all the right logistics, and they've come a really long ways in being able to support us and get a lot of rail cars turned around at a faster rate. And that will help us as we start generating quite a bit more concrete material that'll have to be shipped off site.
And when's that due to start, please? That higher volume?
Sometime in the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Corey, how will you take the building apart? Are you going to take it apart brick by brick, or are you going to actually use explosives?
No explosives are anticipated. Ultimately, what we'll do is we'll peel the roof off the top of the reactor building. We'll cut a hole in the side of it. We'll tear the structural steel and the refill floor off the top of the concrete structure. And then we'll bring big machines up and start working it from the top down. You know, the construction of that building's kind of unique. It's kind of a big rectangle of concrete, and most of the structural support is derived from the containment structure itself in the middle of the big inverted light bulb, which is extremely robust, reinforced, and then it connects to all the floors. So we'll pretty much land the equipment on top of that and start tearing it down and dropping it on itself and work our way from the top down, Marvin. But that's a great question. Next slide, please. And again, as I mentioned before, it's our primary focus to do this once, to do it right, and more importantly, to do it safe. And our plan is, safe. Might seem slow, but safe is smooth. Smooth is fast. And we're going to keep working through it. And if we have to make any checks and adjustments, we'll share those with you as we get into it. But right now, I think we have a good plan. We've done similar work on the turbine building, the advanced off gas building, and several other structures. There's nothing new here. The reactor building's clean. It's going to be no different than it was when we knocked the turbine building down, and we had very good success with that. The turbine building pedestal and the equipment that was in there was just as robust. And I think we have a very good plan. The team knows what to do now. They have a bit of experience with the structure with this type of design and the amount of rebar and concrete that we're dealing with. We got the right equipment, right people to do it. And that's the end of my presentation. Pending any questions.
Thank you, Corey. Well done. If you turn off the screen sharing, please, Tony, I would be grateful. And thanks again, Corey. And any questions for Corey, please? There's a lot. There's a lot there. Yes, go ahead, Lisa. You're on mute, Lisa.
So Corey, you're beginning to tear down the reactor building when?
In the next 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to start that work. Is my anticipated response to that. I don't control that, right? I manage the spent storage installation, but my involvement at the regular meetings and the planning efforts and the walkthroughs with the folks in the demo, barring any complications, we'll be ready to perform that, if not a little bit sooner. I assume either early or mid-June, we'll be putting equipment in place and starting taking that roof off and doing that work that I just described.
So in other words, the main part of like really taking the concrete apart and all of that will be done after school is out across the road, which I think is important, even though we know that you're doing everything safely, just in terms of air quality and what all your decon work with the, radiation. We know that there's a lot of tritium in concrete that becomes part of the concrete.
That's actually not
saying. I mean, I'm glad that you're doing it once school is out.
It's actually very minute traces of tritium. The dose component of it is effectively de minimis, but everything else you said is true. And most of the work will happen, yes, after school's out.
I'm really grateful for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. I know Skylar has a question, but any other panelists have questions first, please, of Corey? Hearing, seeing none. Tony, I don't see any. Do you?
Oh, I have one more question.
Of course, you go right ahead. Of course you do.
Know me yet.
Oh, your reputation as someone who's thorough precedes you, and that's good.
Oh,
so go ahead,
okay,
please.
Well, thanks so much. But now I forgot what I was even going to ask.
I'll tell you what. Let's let Skylar go, and then we'll come back to you. How's that?
That's fine.
Skylar. Go ahead.
Great, thanks. Just a simple question. That huge space below grade in the basement, how is that going to be backfilled?
So ultimately, Skylar, once we knock the building all down, we'll pull all the material out. We'll get it all clean. It'll all get surveyed, and then it'll get confirmatory surveyed. And then ultimately, we'll bring in clean fill and shot rock from an offsite facility that's all been monitored and tested. And then we'll put all that in there, and that it all is consistent with both the MOU and the work that we do with the folks at DEC and A&R. Just so we put clean material in there that we know doesn't have any unusual constituents in it. But basically, clean fill.
Yeah, that's a lot of material.
It's a tremendous volume of material, yes.
So do you know when they dug that out, what happened to the material? I'm curious. Do you know? That's a lot of material to move around. And
well, that's why I mentioned we would be accelerating our shipping campaigns. So we will manage that material as we generate it, because you can't make it all in a day. And obviously there's a large space for a good amount of it to be right there. And we do have quite a bit of area that we can spread it out on site in a controlled fashion and manage it. But it's a good question. But again, it's going to be going on for a while.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Go ahead. Anne, thank you. You're up.
Hi, thank you. This is just a follow on, Corey. I'm just trying to visualize this. You had that huge machine that's going to go up and basically claw into the concrete, right? And to rubbleize it, bring it down.
Excavator with a hammer on the end of it.
Right.
It'll tap, 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 tap for a long time. And we also have another large excavator with what we call a muncher on it. It looks kind of like a lobster claw, and it kind of grabs at the edges and crunches it up, and all that material just falls down. But it's the same process we use for the turbine building.
Right. So I'm visualizing or imagining some dust and things going into the air as that gets rubbleized and comes down. And how do you control that from going very far?
That's a great question. Same measures we took when we did the AOG building, the turbine building, the admin building, right? As the silica dust is a real concern, and we manage that with mitigation strategy. We have a plan baked into our work process. We use basically water at the point of contact for the most part of it. We have these big mister units that spray water at the dust, and it makes it drop out of the air and it falls straight down on the ground. And then there's additional controls we employ. The folks who are doing that are in machines with cabs that are closed, and the other folks involved in it where PPE is appropriate. But basically, it's pretty standard dust control with the use of water suppression, which we have very good practice with, and NorthStar has a tremendous amount of experience. We got to remember they do this type of work in downtown Manhattan, in the middle of Hartford, Connecticut. They do, precision demolition on concrete buildings, and they're able to control all those things in those locations. This is actually a little bit easier in some respects, and because we have the property and location we do, and the practice doing with turbine building, we don't anticipate this being a challenge either.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you. Good questions.
I remember.
Okay, I was just going to say, Lisa.
Well, Dave Eastman a few days ago, and I wasn't aware that NorthStar had floated an idea about having some kind of a battery storage operation on the land, aside from the ISFC, that will hopefully be released for other uses as the ISFC remains for the next few decades, likely. Is there a plan afoot for the reuse of that property? Did he fill me in correctly? Because I hadn't heard about that.
I don't know what details you got on that, Lisa, but ultimately this was an effort to partner with a company who sites and develops things like you're describing, battery storage, potential for solar installation. But that'll all be a handoff for the town of Vernon, and with their approval and blessing for that to happen. And NorthStar doesn't take an active role in managing that business or the design and operation of that equipment.
Okay. I guess I'll ask Maddie later.
Okay. Other questions for Corey, please?
I do not see any on my end.
Okay. Corey, thank you very much. Of course, you're welcome to stay and continue on. That was a great presentation. Good stuff. Good questions. Or head off into the evening as is your want. It's totally up to you.
Well, Commissioner, we kind of need him for quorum since he is not on the panel.
Well, Corey, you're not going anywhere. Just so if I didn't make that clear. I thought we had an extra, but fair enough. Plus,
well, we do.
Doesn't matter. We need you. You never know. Someone might go down. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. Thank for that. So I have on the agenda here, state agencies updates, starting with Department of Public Service. Caroline, is this you?
Yes, this is me. I just Tony, was there another hand raised?
Yes, it looks, I think Chris Campany had his hand raised for a moment. I'm
I
Not
guess I was
seeing
going to
it
ask,
now.
was some other action vote that some other vote that we're taking or something tonight?
Not that I know of. We had a vote
Then
early
the quorum
on.
point is moot.
Yeah.
All right, Chris. Chris, we've decided Corey's staying with us, so we're going to keep moving there.
No, I'm just for future procedure because those kinds of statements kind of haunt us for years after. So,
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Point taken. Caroline, you're up, please.
Sounds good. All right. Well, hi everyone. I'm Caroline Daniels. I'm an attorney with the Public Advocacy Division of the Department of Public Service, and in this presentation, I'll be providing an update on NorthStar's annual reporting, the status of funding to complete the decommissioning, and confirming the project's progress to date. Also with us on the call are Mark Muir and Greg Merritt of the two of the department's financial and technical consultants from 4 Points Consulting for the review of this decommissioning project. Tony, you can go to the next slide. Thanks. So to start out, just considering that this is the first NDCAP meeting of the year, this of 2025, this slide is a short refresher on the role of the panel. The panel was established by Act 179 of the 2014 Vermont legislative session, and its duties are set out in statute. The panel's role is to serve as a conduit for public information and education on the decommissioning of Vermont Yankee, to encourage community involvement in matters related to the decommissioning process, and to advise the Governor, General Assembly, state agencies, and the public on issues related to the decommissioning of Vermont Yankee. The panel holds a minimum of 3 public meetings per year for the purpose of discussing issues related to the decommissioning process. These meetings provide a forum for receiving presentations on the project's progress and for receiving public comments on the decommissioning process. The panel serves in an advisory capacity. It does, as suggested by the name, and it does not have authority to direct the decommissioning of Vermont Yankee. Next slide. Thanks. The department, and just as an overview of the department's role, the department is charged with the ongoing review of NorthStar's financial performance and technical progress throughout the decommissioning process under the 2018 Memorandum of Understanding that was approved by the Public Utility Commission. The department's consultants monitor the financial performance of the project and the financial health of NorthStar, and also confirm the work that NorthStar has performed is reasonable and consistent with the withdrawals from the Site Restoration Trust and the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust, the SRT and the NDT. The department's activities include reviewing monthly and annual reporting from NorthStar, such as decommissioning progress reports, updated progress project schedules, pay item disbursements, and earned value reporting. The department receives notice 30 days in advance of the intended disbursements from the Site Restoration Trust for any work performed, and also monitors the monthly disbursements from the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust. The department conducts monthly meetings with NorthStar to follow up on information requests stemming from those monthly and annual submissions, and as well as monthly meetings with A&R to discuss and review the project progress. The department's consultants conduct regular site visits every few months to verify the project progress that NorthStar describes in its status reports. And the most recent one just happened earlier this month, and I'll be discussing that later in the presentation. And the department also posts all of the information that can be made public on the Vermont Yankee decommissioning page of the department's website. Next slide, please. Under the 2018 Memorandum of Understanding, on March 31st of each year, NorthStar must file an annual public certification with the department, the Agency of Natural Resources, the Department of Health, and the Attorney General's Office. And also, NorthStar also provides a financial disclosures to the department. Next slide. This slide goes through the type of information that NorthStar is required to submit as part of the annual public certification, and it confirms that NorthStar has included all of this information in this year's report. And just something to highlight on this slide is that NorthStar's estimation of the amount of funds required to complete site restoration is $3.623 million as of December 31st, 2024. So as of this past December. Next slide. And this goes through the financial disclosures that are submitted to the department. Oh, just something to note that the annual public report that I was just discussing is also posted on the department's website. But as far as the financial disclosures, the department has received, this slide summarizes the financial disclosures that are reported to the department as part of the annual reporting, and it also confirms that the department has received NorthStar's audited financials, audited statements of fund balances, updated pay item disbursement schedules, and the deal model through the completion of the partial site release and site restoration of the Vermont Yankee site, all as required under the MOU. Next slide. As a financial update, this slide contains a list of the disbursements from the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust and the Site Restoration Trust since NDCAP's last meeting in December. Prior to withdrawing from the Site Restoration Trust, NorthStar provides the department with a 30-day notice of disbursement. The department has the authority to object during that period if it finds that the disbursement does not align with the work performed. And the department has not had a need to object to any of these listed. The department also receives a copy of the disbursements from the NDT on a monthly basis. The disbursement requests are for work that has already been completed. Next slide. Thanks. Continuing with the financial update, the slide contains the trust balances for the NDT and the SRT since April 30th. The balances shown in the table include their present value and their projected value if the trust assets are held to maturity. So the trust balances are reflective of current market conditions and are influenced by changing interest rates as the trusts are invested in U.S. Treasury securities. The securities have laddered maturity dates, and NorthStar has stated its intent to hold onto them until the date of maturity. So the NDT and the SRT balances in the first and the third columns reflect the present value of the trusts if the assets are liquidated prior to maturity and they incurred losses that NorthStar doesn't expect to incur, what would otherwise be unrealized loss. And the balances in the second and the fourth columns reflect the projected value of the trusts when the assets are held until their maturity date. And below the table is a summary specific to each type of work activity and showing the license termination activities as of April 30th, 2025. The license termination activities totaled $477.2 million has been earned, leaving $59 million requested to complete the license termination work. The Nuclear Decommissioning Trust assets total $52.5 million as of April 30th, 2025. And for the Site Restoration Trust, NorthStar has earned $21.5 million, leaving $3.5 million to complete the site restoration work. The Site Restoration Trust assets total $47.2 million as of April 30th. Next slide. Our consultant from Four Points Group recently conducted a site visit at the beginning of May. The consultant observed observed active work areas within the reactor building and outside the reactor building, outside areas adjacent to the turbine and the reactor buildings, including the rad waste building, the reactor building access ramp construction, and the discharge structure, as well as the intake structure. The consultant did not observe any conditions that were inconsistent with the progress reported by NorthStar in their status reports of the last few months from January, February, and March of 2025. Finally, as a note on the discrepancy between the NDT balance and the remaining license termination activities, the NDT balance is reflective of current market conditions and does not account for continuing quarterly interest payments on the Treasury securities. So NorthStar's stated intent is to hold all securities to maturity, and NorthStar assumes that the value of the NDT at maturity is $52.5 million, and they also expect to continue receiving interest earnings on the NDT, which are not reflected in the reported values. Additionally, if there is a need for additional funding beyond the NDT for license termination activities, the 2018 MOU has added financial assurances of the $140 million support agreement and the $55 million escrow agreement. So in conclusion, based on the last approved schedule provided by NorthStar and the annual financial reporting, the department's consultants find that the estimated work completed is reasonable. NorthStar appears to be on course to complete the project with available funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Any questions on anything that Caroline offered, please? Hearing, seeing none. Graham, are we shifting to you now, please?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Sorry, Graham. I just want to, shame on me. Sorry, Graham. I just want to say, Caroline, thank you very much. That's helpful and to the point. I really do appreciate it. Graham, you're up. Sorry about that.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So yeah, my name's Graham Bradley. You see it there, top right. I work with the sort of contaminated sites program within the Waste Management and Prevention Division of the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, which is within the Agency of Natural Resources. So most of you have seen my introductory slide before. Our role is primarily to regulate according to the rules, the contaminated sites rules and the various permitting rules that fall within DEC, but also to keep an eye on ensure that sort of the conditions within the memorandum of understanding are being met as well. So I coordinate our monthly meetings as they are now instead of every 2 weeks, just given the need of what's happening on site. And so we're mainly involved with the non-radiological aspects of the site and potential contamination and remediation. And that's regulated within what we call the I rule, which is our nickname for the investigation and remediation of contaminated properties rule. Next slide, please. So you'll be pleased to know, given the duration of the meeting tonight and some of the longer presentations, I kept it fairly short. Perhaps at the next meeting, I'll provide a few more photographs and slides of what's been happening. I've just summarized the activities since our last meeting here that I'm personally involved in regulating. It's on the non-radiological side. There has been some ongoing investigation still, particularly of the PFAS, these forever chemicals that are turning up in various places these days. We have seen some on site associated with the leach fields and investigating the leach field on the southern part of the site, put in some new wells And we discovered NorthStar and their consultant Haley and Aldrich found that there's a well there with up to 100 parts per trillion. So we measure PFAS in very, very small concentrations, parts per trillion, 0.1 part per billion. These are, so in the 2 wells where this was identified, we actually regulate groundwater to the same standards as drinking water in Vermont. So this is water that you would not want to drink for the rest of your life. It's above those standards, but these are still very low concentrations. And eventually they will need to delineate that area. On the site at the moment, the ramp that's been built as part of the demolition is sort of in the way. And so the demolition will occur first, and then Haley and Aldrich and NorthStar will be able to continue with delineating this area of PFAS and groundwater. And it's quite like if that remains above the standards, then there will need to be some kind of what we call an institutional control, a check on the property so nobody puts a drinking water well in that area. The other investigation that's occurred in the last few months is along the railroad. As part of the MOU, NorthStar have expressed their desire to clean up the site to residential standards. These are very conservative standards that would allow someone to live on the property, play in the dirt. Now, it's quite obvious that along the railroad line itself, they're not going to achieve that residential standard. That railroad line is going to remain because of the desire to remove those fuel casks eventually, potentially using that rail line. So what Haley and Aldrich have done is just delineate where the clean soil either side of that rail line. So that has been done and delineated in the last few months. Post-demolition surveys, the construction office building. We actually didn't have a reason to suspect contamination in that area, but to be conservative, Haley and Aldrich on behalf of NorthStar, after that building was demolished, they went in there, they looked for any staining, for potentially oil leaks, petroleum, hydrocarbons, any odors, and used a device, a PID, to actually look for volatile organic compounds in the soils. Those came back clean, so that was surveyed. There was no reason to do any additional investigation there. And the other, what we call a corrective action or a remediation that has taken place in the first few months of the year was in the South Warehouse building area, what we call Area of Concern 3. And there were various materials, batteries, and other materials stored in that area during the working life of the station. And it was identified that there were some areas there with polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, so oils in the soil that was above residential standards. I say, and those concentrations for residential standards are very low. What normally happens is you investigate the edges of that area so that you know the area to be excavated and disposed of. That was done to a certain extent, but NorthStar requested permission because they have this ready access to disposal of soils, use that as ballast on the trains going to Texas, that they actually excavated that contaminated soil and then checked the boundaries. And where there was an area that wasn't quite clean to residential standards, they basically chipped away with it until they reached the clean soils. So we have confirmatory samples to show that all of that contaminated soil was removed and then backfilled with clean soils in that area. So that was some corrective action that's taken place recently. And then my colleagues in drinking water division and in the surface watershed management division have continued with their regular permitting activities on site. There is still a well that's classified as public water supply on site, and so that has the usual permitting activities associated with it, as well as stormwater management. It's an active construction site or deconstruction site, and so that has to be managed to ensure that there's not uncontrolled runoff and sediment leaving the site, and that has continued as normal without a hitch. So that's all I have to say for this evening.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you, Graham. Any questions for Graham, please? Covered a lot of ground there. Interesting with the dirt as ballast. That was a kind of a good turn of events there. Okay. Yes, Marvin.
Just a short question. Will DEC monitor air contamination when the building is being taken down?
So that is actually with my colleagues in the air division, and there aren't plans to do that at the moment. It's I can certainly ask about the context of that. As far as I understand, as Corey was describing, this is a relatively routine activity, and I don't believe there's a reason for specific concerns over that and for that requirement for air monitoring under those conditions. But that's something I will look into the context of that more. That's not. I'm a groundwater specialist and more used to dealing with the ground, so I'd have to look into the context of that question more.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. So, Graham, just so I'm clear, so you will come back to our next discussion in response to Marvin's question, at least, or we can ask Tony, what's the deal here? Because I get Graham, you just said, look, I'm the water person. You got to talk to the air person. Is that where we'd have someone from the Air Pollution Control Division, or how does that work? Or ask Graham to carry water for them? No pun intended. How does that work?
Well, I think it's a question of if we can get a quick answer. I think Graham can relay the question to the Air Monitoring Division over in DEC and maybe get an answer,
okay.
I don't know, in writing in a few weeks. If there's something that they want to discuss further, we can bring that up as as a subject for discussion at the September meeting.
Why don't we leave it there? That's a great suggestion, Tony. Graham, if you would please, if you convey Marvin's question, if you have it clear in your mind, and then if you can get the answer to Tony, and then if your colleague from the Air Pollution Control Division wants to come address, or Marvin or others would like to put them on the hot seat here and ask them some questions, we'll keep it. It'll be open both ways.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, it's just an unknown context for me at the moment in terms of demolition.
That's fair.
I have dealt with them before in terms of stack emissions.
Yeah.
But not in terms of demolition.
Well, if you could just connect the appropriate colleague with Tony, and then we'll see, get an answer. And as I said, it may be that person wants to come address this panel, or it may be the panel would like them to come. So we'll see.
Sure.
Thank you. Lisa, you had a question. Lisa, sorry, you're on mute again. Sorry.
I keep putting it off because my dog barks. Sorry about that. My question was along the same lines, although regarding the radiation monitoring that is done within the site by NorthStar, but at the fence line, and there's there's some testing equipment for the air at the school that Bill Irwin and the Department of Health monitor. And I'm just wondering, because I see Bill Irwin is on the phone, I know you don't have any control over monitoring at the site itself. That is up to NorthStar, and NorthStar makes those measurements. But will you be monitoring, particularly during the demolition of the reactor building? Will you be doing any, monitoring at that time, or how do you know if there's anything going on? Are you tipped off in terms of the monitoring, or do you take a look at it more closely when you know something is going on that could potentially lead to fence line spikes? How does that work?
Yeah, thanks. Just for grounding here, I work for the health department, and we have environmental monitoring around the Vermont Yankee site. It's essentially all off-site monitoring. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, as Lisa noted, has the jurisdiction on site. However, we have a very similar setup for air monitoring as that used by Vermont Yankee. We had a tour last week where I saw the air sampling equipment, and we have the same setup. It's at the school, as you mentioned. We've been collecting air samples at the school constantly since probably 1968, and we monitor consistently through operations, and we have through the decommissioning. We would run it every day, and we change those air samples periodically and evaluate any changes. And so far, with the demolitions that have occurred of numerous other buildings, which are also places that radioactive materials were stored, used, generated, and capable of contaminating the concrete and other surfaces that were being demolished and decommissioned. We've so far not found any air samples that were above normal background for the area. And that would mean air samples that are taken further away from the site and not impacted by the activities at the site. So we're confident that that will likely be the case during the largest contaminated building there on site, the reactor building. But obviously we'll know only after we get those results and analyze them. And we do look at the air sample results from Vermont Yankee, what they submit to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and their reporting is essentially identical to that which I gave you from our monitoring, and that is that there's not been a substantial change over the course of time with the air sampling. Their doses are calculated from the air sampling, and we do not see any significant dose in the air from particulates. And when the opportunities very early in decommissioning existed for gases, vapors, and radioactive iodines, we did not see any dose contributions above background there.
So you'll be monitoring all through the reactor building demolition, and we can feel confident about that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Graham.
Yeah, I thank you for that, Bill. And I'm just sort of processing Marvin's question. Was it the radiological monitoring that you were particularly thinking of, Marvin, or was it general particulates in the air? I mean, from the radiological monitoring, as Bill has just demonstrated, Department of Health, normally, that's within their jurisdiction. And when it comes to, I'm thinking now from my experience of remediating sites where you might be moving dirt around, and usually that air monitoring is part of the overall health and safety plan, and it would be the entity doing that demolition that would be monitoring that. And so that might be a question for Corey, and what sort of air monitoring NorthStar may have planned just for particulates. And you've already explained some of the mitigation to keep that down. But I wasn't sure if there was any monitoring planned as part of those activities by NorthStar as well.
I was thinking of
question for Marvin and a
particulates.
question for Corey.
I was thinking of particulates, and
Okay.
yes, I was reassured by what Corey had to say, that they were going to keep, they would moist the air and make sure the particulates didn't escape.
Okay. Thank you for the follow-up, Graham. Okay. Other questions for either Graham? Bill, you kind of got roped in as well, or for Bill, if I may, Bill, just to offer you up there. Any other questions, please? Tony, I'm not seeing any currently.
Me neither. I am checking chat just to make sure that there's no questions there, but I don't see anything out. There was a comment from Chris Campany directed to me, and we'll discuss that later, Chris.
Okay. Thank you. I don't believe there are any other state agency reports for this evening. Is that true, Tony?
That is correct.
Okay, and we had questions on the reports on both from NorthStar and from the state officials. Why don't we then shift to the Nuclear Waste Policy Committee update?
Okay. Let's see here.
Is you, Lissa? Is you up? Okay.
Trying to get my screen up. Okay. So we had our first meeting of the Nuclear Waste Policy Committee on February 20, I think it was February 28th. And we had members of the federal delegation that came and spoke to us about legislative plans for this year. We had Representative Levin, who co-chairs the Spent Fuel Caucus in the House. He's the Democratic representative from San Onofre. Some of you might know they have a lot of casks right on the ocean. I mean, right on the ocean, Pacific Ocean, outside of San Diego, and they're very eager to get those casks moved. So they are really pushing, and they have a coalition that's pushing for approval of a consolidated interim storage facility, whatever way we can get one. And so we heard from his staffer, Amanda Schaefer. She was joined by Ethan Hinch from Senator Sanders' office, and Lucas Kauth from Senator Welch's office, as well as Becca Balance person, Owen Doherty. So one of the purposes of having the Federal Nuclear Waste Policy Committee is so that the NDCAP as a whole can just be aware of what's happening in terms of federal efforts to change laws and to enact new legislation that would impact our ISFC and our ability to fully decommission the Vermont Yankee reactor. So to that end, we speak and keep in contact with representatives. One thing that Congressman Levin is working on with the Spent Fuel Caucus, which also Becca Balance, our local U.S. rep, also sits on the caucus. They're going to reintroduce their Nuclear Waste Administration Act, which is basically calls for the creation, taking the function of managing the nuclear waste out of the Department of Energy and creating a new agency. It's something that's been talked about for many years, was part of the recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Commission under Obama. And the Senate would need to confirm an administrator for a new agency. So all that's going to come up again this year and be discussed, and I think it's going to take on a new sense of urgency. So our committee will be watching that very, very closely. The Department of Energy is still going around and having meetings all around the United States through their consortia to try to get communities comfortable with the idea of having facilities, consolidated interim storage and otherwise in their districts, in their states. So that the Trump administration, last time they came in, defunded that whole effort, but they did not do that this time. And I think that they did not do that because there's a real push with Chris Wright, the new Department of Energy head, is pushing for more nuclear. And they want to make progress on nuclear waste issues, or at least the appearance of progress. So I think they're continuing with that consent-based siting initiatives. So that's moving on. Our next meeting was supposed to be sometime this month, but I think we are still waiting to see what we're going to discuss. And I've been a little distracted with my own actual work. But I think what we're going to probably be looking at is the nuclear waste fund, because some of these bills call for a new administrator to take hold of the nuclear waste fund, which is many billions of dollars. I think it's up to about $48 billion in the nuclear waste fund right now. And there's a lot of eyes on that, what happens with that, with this new administration. So we'll be monitoring that. And I think that Senator Sanders and Senator Welch are also planning to reintroduce a bill that would, the Advance Act, that would call for communities like ours to get more federal help while we are safeguarding the nuclear waste in our midst. In other words, Department of Economic Development Administration money potentially that would come to us to help us steward the waste as we are doing right now. So those legislative efforts are going to be reintroduced sometime soon, they say, before the end of the year. So we'll see. We'll keep monitoring. And if there's other questions from the rest of the panel, I'm happy to address them or take suggestions for areas that you might be interested in us taking a look at.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. Thank you very, very much. Really good report. There's a little bit of strange noise there, but we'll push through. Any questions or responses to Alyssa's solicitation for other ideas, priorities, things you would invite the group to examine, please?
I got a question.
Please.
Yes.
Bob Leach. Have you heard anything more about the two permanent waste storage facilities for people? One was in New Mexico, was in Texas. They were both licensed by the NRC.
Yes.
But the last I heard, they couldn't ship there yet. Could you give us an update on that?
Yeah, those are the two private, the Holtec facility and the waste control specialist. I know they've changed their name, but they're the sister company to NorthStar in Andrews, Texas, and they are the subject of actually a Supreme Court decision that we're waiting for to see whether or not the NRC behaved legally when they issued those licenses. So as we know, in both Texas and New Mexico, the governors and the state legislatures have said that they do not want those facilities. So if we were going to follow a consent-based siting regime that DOE has outlined and others seem to support, I don't know whether that would figure into the licensing and progress of private facilities the way they would for any federally led facilities. But so I don't have any update is the short answer on that, Bob, except that we are awaiting a Supreme Court decision that will let us know whether those licenses were indeed issued according to the law in the Supreme Court's opinion.
Thank you.
I don't know if Corey might have some further updates on that. I don't know, but if you do, feel free to weigh in, Corey.
I think
I
you're
haven't heard a word.
up to date on that, Lisa. I think everybody's waiting on that decision to come down and the interpretation to be made.
Yes.
Thanks, Corey.
Thanks, Corey.
I just will add that I did participate in one of those consent-based consortia that the DOE has been funding.
Yeah.
The tune
How'd you find it?
I went there and there was a whole mixed bag of people, And
Lissa, just interrupt. Sorry. And where was this one, please?
it was in Worcester, Massachusetts at Clark University, and it was run by the Keystone Collective in Colorado, and our local person, Tom Webler, who partners with them.
Okay.
I did participate in that. And one of the big takeaways in their report, which is not quite ready, I will share it with the whole panel when it is
Nice.
ready, is that, the strong feeling, as we said in our advisory opinion as NDCAP a couple years ago, we don't think it's good practice to go and try to approve a centralized interim storage facility absent any progress on a deep geologic repository that we all know we still need. So, the group has actually reinforced the opinion of NDCAP, and in our advisory opinion to DOE that we made several years ago, to say it's really not a good idea to be trying to push a CIS when you have not made any progress and are not discussing what everyone in the industry and otherwise recognizes we are in need of, which is progress on a deep geological repository. So that stands in the way of progress, I think, and will stand in the way of any community giving consent. Because think about it, why would you consent to something that's supposed to be temporary when there's no progress being made in what's considered a permanent repository? So this is continues to be a sticking point for DOE and everybody else. So we'll see what's in store. The Trump administration might move hard and fast on this, and we're going to just keep watching it closely.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Lissa. Any other questions for Lissa, please?
Looks like Chris Campany has his hand raised.
Thank you, Tony. Chris.
I was going to say, I was also at that group in that meeting in Worcester, and I mean, what I really took away from it was there was agreement that how important the process is, and that it's necessary for the communities that are volunteering to consider being an interim spent fuel storage site, that they be given access to experts, be given access to data, and be able to pull themselves out of that process at any point should they feel like things aren't going in a way that makes them feel in control of the, largely in control of the decision making. In other words, if it starts getting kind of rammed down their throat, then that's not gonna. So anyway, just wanted to, I thought that was one of the more important things that came out of that discussion.
Thank you for that, Chris. Thank you for bringing that up. That was a very, very important part of it. And I actually forgot that you were there with me. So thanks for reminding me.
Okay.
And Darling is raised.
I was there too.
Yeah.
Any takeaway? Well, thank you, Ann. What did you think? Any particular insight you took away from the event, please?
Yes.
I think those were the two big ones. There were people from all over New England, and it was really great to sit down with a bunch of people with all different kinds of roles. Me being kind of an activist, and Chris being a planning, and Lissa being on the NDCAP, and Dave Eastman was there as well, and another person from a couple other people from my group, Citizens Awareness Network. Yeah.
Okay.
Great conversation.
There's another gathering of this sort that I have been invited to for September. In Colorado, they pay your way well. So I told them if I'm available, I'll go, but that would be something in September.
Okay.
Early
Keystone.
And I think our next meeting is September 22nd of the full NDCAP. So if I did attend that, I would report back on that then at that time.
Okay. Thank you. That we'll take you up on that if in fact you attend. That'd be great. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Commissioner, this is actually something Carolyn Daniels just forwarded to me. For whatever reason, I'm not seeing it in the chat. But we have a question from Rachel. don't have a last name. I understand there's ongoing site monitoring at various sites throughout this project. Has there been any structured plan for ongoing monitoring of people's health, residents, individuals throughout this? It seems if different monitoring sites yield different results, and obviously you can't monitor every possible site of contamination, etc., but sometimes find a site. So is people monitoring something that's happening?
I thank you for that, Rachel. Bill, I see you're still on. I hate to put you on the spot, but as the Department of Health, do you have a response to that question, please?
So that has not been arranged for by any state agreement, and that would be likely something that would require significant discussion, because to the date, the owners of the facility, Vermont Yankee as a nuclear power station and now as a property of a former power station being decommissioned, there's been an owner who has made agreements with the state to fund environmental monitoring. And that environmental monitoring has changed over the course of time to where now it's designed for decommissioning and incorporates several different avenues, primarily air, water, and gamma radiation direct emanations from the materials left there on site, primarily at the Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation. But after the NRC releases NorthStar from the license conditions for the operating or formerly operating nuclear power station, there would have to be a new agreement for monitoring in the aftermath of the decommissioning. The current agreement between NorthStar and the state was described in the memorandum of understanding that was signed by all parties with the help of the Public Service Department and the Public Service Commission, and it would require that sort of thing again to essentially ask NorthStar to fund some sort of environmental monitoring of the Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation, which would be the only licensed activity at the property after the decommissioning of the facility and the final status survey proved that it could be released for unrestricted use.
Okay. Okay. So, Rachel, I think that's the answer, I guess, is what I would say. I would imagine it may not be everything you want to hear, but that's the status. That's where we're at. So thank you, Bill. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
No, not at all.
Okay. Any other questions, Tony?
We do have a response from Rachel that says, thank you, that's helpful. I appreciate you addressing my question. So okay. I guess we got an answer.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rachel, for the question and that response. All right. Well, then, not seeing any other questions, let's move to the panel chair status discussion. I am currently serving as the chair. I am ready, willing, and eager to pass the gavel off to someone who would be interested in serving as the chair. I think, Tony, if you would please remind us of the requirements, or people who are sitting here now could serve as chair. Is that right?
Yeah, anyone on the panel is eligible to serve as chair. So the options are we can have a panel chair and a panel vice chair, which is what we've typically done. With the Public Service Commissioner designated as basically as an emergency or a backup chair. We also have the option of, in lieu of a panel chair and vice chair, that we could have two co-chairs. Though that option has never been suggested. Right now, it would just be nice to have one panel chair rather than the commissioner.
Let me just ask, and is there anyone who would be interested in serving as chair? Okay, and we have, how many open slots do we have, Tony?
At present, there are 5 open slots on the panel. That includes there is an optional position for the former Massachusetts EPZ towns.
That's right.
We have 3 citizen appointees, one by the governor, one by the Senate Pro Tem, one by the Vermont House Speaker open. And also, too, the Senate's representative on the panel is open because Mark McDonald did not win re-election. So the Senate's representative needs to be a member of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee.
I have reached out to one of the 3 members of the Committee on Committees in the Senate. I haven't yet to hear back. I have the action item to follow up on that for the Senate leader. Why don't we leave it at this? Honestly, what I'm thinking about is, as used in my tradition, in our family's tradition, in church and other places, I would invite you to reflect, and if you are called to serve, please feel free. In the meantime, we will continue to explore. While you have a few names, we're looking for local individuals who we believe might be interested in serving. To me, that would be ideal. Look, I'll do it as long as I need to, but I think, as evidenced by the rich debate, especially by people following this who live nearby, I just think that's a real healthy dynamic.
Yeah.
I just think it is. But all right, so we'll do that. We'll continue to recruit people. I'll find out where we stand with regards to the Senate representation. Are there any other general public comments to this panel at this time, please? I don't see anyone, Tony. Do you?
I'm not seeing anyone either. Just one quick note, just on Lissa's report. This just dawned on me as I was looking at everything. The meeting that she referenced actually occurred on February 24th. I think she mentioned February 28th, but we'll just correct that for the record.
Okay.
Okay, with that momentous change, the moment under. Thank
Well,
you
I want
for.
to say, Commissioner, that, I am vice chair. So if you can't make a meeting or or otherwise, I'm happy to step in as required. So
Thank you, Lissa. Thank you. Thank you very much. Jim, I didn't know if there's anything to be, I see your handsome face now. I didn't know if you was willing to say something. You were just before we sign off, just saying hello. Okay, I'll take that as a.
I think he's trying to unmute.
Oh, okay.
Or something. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, that was painful. Okay.
Something wrong with his voice tonight. Right? I had an issue like that a few months ago where I had laryngitis. Is that what's going on, Jim? Yes.
I know it's not laryngitis, but he is recovering from a throat issue right now. So
okay. Yeah. Well, I think I'm the one that brought us down this path. Why don't we stop that at this moment? And I would be grateful for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Chris. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion? No. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. I don't hear any opposing. Thank you very much. You stuck with it. I appreciate it. Corey and others, I really appreciate the presentation. Bill Irwin, thank you for sticking around. Graham, Caroline, I don't see your face. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Lissa, thank you very much. Well done. Well done. Thank you.